Hey Steve, the weather is still way too hot here. We're going to be in the high 80s, low 90s with high humidity, but I'm still thinking about the upcoming hunting season. I'm seeing a lot of tech questions coming up on some of our electronic training equipment out there from people that are bear hunting. They're in full swing with bear training season right now across the United States. Have you been seeing that a lot on social media?
I have. I've been thinking myself about getting up to the mountains of Virginia and doing a little training myself. And, when technical questions come up, the normal reaction is call customer service at the equipment manufacturers, and sometimes that can involve a long wait on the phone. Our friends at W Hunting Supply have great tech support, and I'm told if you call up there, that Jason will get on the phone with you and get to the root of your problem right away. So if I have a problem with my equipment this fall, that's what I'm going to do.
Sounds like a great idea, and Jason's going to be with us at the upcoming major coon hound event or hound event of the United States, Autumn Oaks. So he's going to be in the booth with us. So you can stop by our booth, pick up all your Houndsman XP logo wear, and also pick Jason's brain about any questions you might have about your Garmin or Dogtra or whatever platform you're using there to track your hounds.
Absolutely. W Hunting Supply is a one-stop shop for everything the houndsman needs. They're online at www.dusupply.com.
Good morning, houndsmen and houndswomen of America and beyond. We are here with a great podcast of the Houndsman XP. My name is Eddie, and I will be your host for today. Yes, you may not have heard my voice before because I'm coming to you from Oregon to interview my guys, Steve and Chris. I'm a novice, and I want to pick their brain on how to become a houndsman. So, guys, welcome. Good morning.
That's pretty good, Eddie.
Hey, Eddie, you're doing a great job there.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah,
I'm
really.
trying.
Yeah. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you.
Well, we always talk about the weather. What do you got? In Oregon, you probably got some clouds and some rain, maybe.
Well, you would expect, but no. Actually, the sun is just coming up over the trees right now, and we have clear skies. It's probably about 68 somewhere in there. So it's been pretty warm the past couple of days. Very humid, like out in Florida. Past couple of days, it's been very humid. But normally it's not. Pretty dry heat when it is warm. But yeah, it's been beautiful. 85, and nice. So.
Are you on the coast or are you in the eastern part?
No, sir. I'm about an hour and a half from the coast. So
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not too far from there. We like to take a couple trips out there and go have fun at the ocean. It's not like Florida beaches.
I think they're more beautiful from what I've seen.
Oh yeah.
It's different. I've lived in Florida. I used to live in Winter Park.
Oh yeah.
And so, Central Florida go, everywhere. But yeah, it's different. It's nice. They both have their beautiful places. So
my grandparents used to pull an RV from Columbus, Indiana, all the way down to Winter Park and spend the winters down there. They had an Airstream, and my grandpa was very meticulous, and he kept that thing all shined up, and the inside was immaculate. But that was back. They actually started doing that back before the days of the interstate system, or before it was complete all the way down through there. So they would drive US 31 from Columbus all the way down, and then hop off somewhere. But it used to take them. They'd take 3 days just to drive to Florida. And now with the interstate system, I'll hop in a truck and or a car, and I could be at Steve's in a single day if I want a road warrior that trip.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of taking the bus from Winter Park to Washington State. So I understand.
Well,
I understand how that goes.
Yeah, my first experience with Florida was coming to college in 1966 from West Virginia, and it was on a Greyhound.
You had to ride it.
And
exactly.
and
That's
it
how I
was
traveled.
it was the milk run. We stopped at every little town between West Virginia and Florida. It took us 20 some hours, as I recall. Those highways on the East Coast were Highway 301 and 321 and some of those things. And,
so did Holman ride you on the back of the mule to the bus terminal? How long was the mule ride?
Actually, I lived in the corner or in the edge of town. You know, we were city folk. I mean, I could walk across the highway and I was in the country. Yeah. But man, we had we had running water and they paved the street when I was a kid. We used to have what they called Red Dog on the street. Does anybody have an idea what Red Dog is? Red Dog is like a slag that comes out of the mines, and actually after they burn the coal. After they burn the coal, and it's like a clinker. Maybe you heard of that. Yeah. It's kind of an iron reddish color, and it's brittle, and it's all kinds of crazy shapes. And in West Virginia, they used to put that down for a hard surface on the road. And of course, if you haven't ridden your bike and hit a good sized chunk of Red Dog and done a couple of flips over the handlebars, you haven't lived, So, anyway, I don't know how we got down this rabbit path.
Yeah. Oh boy. So I got a question for y'all. So Chris, how did you get involved with hounds?
Well, I was just your typical kid and grew up in the country, grew up on a farm, and I've told the story before, Eddie, but I'll kind of breeze through it pretty quick here. But when I was a kid, we would go to my uncle's house for holidays, Thanksgiving, things like that, and he always had probably way too many hounds tied around there, but they always intrigued me even as a kid. And he was your typical houndsman, hard hunting guy, and he would we'd be sitting on the porch and the sun would start going down and you start seeing him shifting in his chair, and you could tell that he didn't want to be rude and tell you he was leaving, but you could tell he was getting restless, and eventually he would just get up and go out to the truck and start packing things up and getting ready to go hunting and loading those hounds and stuff. And that was kind of our cue that we either needed to go hunting with him or we could sit on the porch as long as we wanted, or we could go home. It was up to us. So it's kind of like my great grandfather. He used to go to bed at 8 o'clock every night, and he would always look at us and say, "Well, I don't want you people to feel bad about leaving, so I'll just go to bed." And that's kind of the way Bart was with hunting. He's like, I don't want you people to feel bad about leaving early, but I'm going hunting. So that's how I got rolling, Eddie. And he actually gave me my first hound. I hunted with him for a couple years there, off and on as often as I could, and I was 13 years old when I got that first hound. So just took off from there.
Yeah. What kind of hound was it?
It was an English red tick, and his name was Hawk, and he was a good-looking dog, and deep dark liver red. He did. I don't know who is more worthless in the woods, me or Hawk. He never turned into a coon hound, partially because I didn't know what I was doing, and I'm sure he could have turned into something if he would have a more experienced hand on him, because he was out of some of that old blood. He had Boyd's Little Joe and some of the Wilder's Goose, I think. I'm trying to recall from memory, but it was older English red tick or older English blood.
Okay. Well, yeah, starting off, sometimes you might ruin a couple of dogs before you get it right.
Well, I think that's the value of having this podcast, Eddie, and having you come on here and host this and talk to us, because, even though you don't have a hound that you're hunting yet, you're interested and you're fired up, and that's kind of how we got to know each other. And when you first, I'll add this real quick. When you first asked to join the group on our Facebook page, I always look at people's profiles on there, and I do that for a couple reasons. The main reason is to make sure that we're not having infiltrators coming in and have access to everybody's profile. So we don't want to give people's email accounts or their profiles or anything to the anti-hunting crowd. So I was looking at yours, and I actually denied your membership on the Houndsman XP podcast group at one time, and
wow,
yeah, and sent you a message, and you responded, and
right.
We started talking, and I could tell that you were a guy that even though you weren't an experienced houndsman, you had a passion for wanting to get into hounds, and
yes, sir.
So that's how we kind of developed this concept of you interviewing us and you hosting today. So.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm tickled, man. So yeah, thank you for accepting my membership. Because yeah, you're right. I remember you messaged me, and we chatted a little bit, and then boom, I was able to be in the membership. So that was a good thing, and I'm happy for it. So question for you, Steve. I know that when your dad has been a pretty big influence in your life as you grew up, becoming a houndsman, did you have any other mentors that you looked up to?
Well, I did, Eddie. My uncles primarily. My dad had two brothers. He was the middle brother. He had an older brother, Phil, that was a couple of years older, and a younger brother, Julian. And they always had dogs on their farm back there in Tennessee. So when we'd go to visit, there was always dogs around and talk of going hunting, either rabbit hunting or squirrel hunting or coon hunting at a very young age. And, of course, when I started out following my dad's footsteps, and I think listeners are pretty familiar with that story. But as I got a little older, and my father worked away a lot. He was a pipe fitter and worked up and down the Ohio Valley building powerhouses and chemical plants and such. And he would be gone during the week. And there was a fellow in our church whose name was Howard Meadows. And Howard was kind of my hero as a young guy coming up, because Howard had been through a really tough life. He grew up in a coal mining town there in West Virginia, went into the Army, World War II. He was captured by the Germans in Italy, put into a prison of war camp. At the close of when the Germans kind of bugged out, as they say, and were trying to get back, I think, to their homeland, they kind of left these prison camps unattended, and Howard was able to get out, and he had to travel back through enemy lines to get back to some safety. So he'd endured all that and had a Purple Heart. But then when he came back home and went to work in the mines, as everybody does there in that part of the world, he was very severely injured. When they call the rib, the sidewall like of the mine kind of collapsed in on him, and he got a very serious back injury and had some internal problems and all. But he was one of the toughest guys that I ever met. He walked with a very severe limp, And but he would go hunting and hunt all night with you. And my dad was gone, and so I would go with Howard, and he and I hunted many, many nights together. So he was a definite influence. I think probably, you know, my dad had much more experience in teaching me the ins and outs of hounds than Howard did, but keeping me in the woods and teaching me wood lore and how to be a woodsman and how, you know, we groundhog hunted with dogs in the daytime. We squirrel hunted, we trout fished, we did all kinds of things together. And he was a great influence in my life as well. So there's been a lot of people down through the years because I've been so crazy over these hounds and tried to learn everything that I could and associate with the people. There's some pretty funny stories about how, you know, I would go hunting with the town drunk if I could, you know, when I was a kid. And literally that happened a couple of times. My parents wouldn't have been happy to know that on some of those coon hunts that I went along, the guys were sitting there passing the jug back and forth, and I would have to get them up and keep them moving because I knew if they got too much into that jug, I wasn't they were going to stay there, and I was going to be stuck. So anyway, but that's I'd say Howard Meadows, besides my dad, was probably one of the greatest influences on me.
Okay. So another question for you, Steve. What is your definition as a houndsman? Like, you know, what would you call a houndsman?
Well, first of all, I think a houndsman, as opposed maybe to people that use hunting dogs for other purposes, such as bird hunters or duck hunters or whatever. The hound, you know, is a unique animal. He's a scent specialist, you know, and I don't know. The thing for me with a houndsman is someone that goes beyond the idea of just getting a dog, going to some kind of competition, whether it's a field trial or a bench show or a night hunt, and the object being a trophy. I think the true houndsman is a guy that, number one, loves the dogs down deep inside. Got to have that love for the scent hound world. Watching the dog work, listening to a dog trail, seeing that dog use the tools that God gave him to put that quarry in a tree or bring it around to the gun or whatever. So down deep inside, first of all, there's got to be a love for the dogs, number one. And then number two, I think it's to learn as much about the particular game animal that you're hunting with those hounds. That was always one of the most important parts of me is knowing where to go. In the case of coon hunting, which has been my number one sport, was knowing at what times of the year to hunt where, knowing what that dog's telling me. So it's a communication thing between the hunter and the dog. And I'm reminded now with the electronic devices that we have, how many young people are just, you know, watching that screen all the time, and they're not really learning that dog, you know, and that communication between the dog and the hunter, I think that's at the core of being a true houndsman. I could go on, but that's pretty much it.
I can follow up with that a little bit, Eddie, if you don't mind. You know,
please do.
You know, I've answered this question when other people have asked me too about being a houndsman. And of course, when I was 13 years old, I wanted to call myself a houndsman. And truly believed at that time that since I had a coon dog and a light and could go hunting, that I was a houndsman. And even at age 15 or age 50 now, I still realize that I've got so much more to learn. After a few decades of hunting and things like that, you know, do we ever really achieve that title of houndsman? Houndsmanship is so involved in knowing, like Steve said, you've got to develop that woods lore. You've got to understand what your dogs are doing, what they're trying to tell you. where you're going to turn them loose. You got to be able to read sign. You got to be able to know how old the track is before you turn loose on it. If you're big game hunting, you've got to be able to identify if you're rigging dogs down the road. You've got to know whether or not your old dog is giving you a strike. Give you an example. You got 3 dogs tied up on the rack, and you've got one true hound up there that is pure, and they're going to strike a track, and it's going to be the game that you're looking for. And then you got 2 young dogs up there. You know, they may strike on a deer, they may strike on a coon, they may whatever you're hunting that day, but you've got to know what those dogs are telling you. And then finally, I always say this. You know, I know several people that hunt. In my career, I met thousands and thousands and thousands of people who were in the field hunting. And over that course of my career, I just met a handful of people that were true sportsmen or woodsmen, you know, that were comfortable in the woods,
right,
that knew the woods. They could tell you the difference between a red elm and a beech and a white oak or a pin oak, or they knew what a serviceberry was. They knew when the raspberries were going to be ripe. They knew those sort of things, and that just takes time. And so
right,
while we all aspire to be a houndsman and be able to wear that title, whatever that title means, a true houndsman is humble, and they realize that they're never going to stop learning, not only from their own experiences, but from the people they associate with, and the realization that they can still learn things from people who may not have as much experience as they do. You know, so it's a humble type thing too.
right. Good. Perfect. And that leads me to my next question. So, you know, what are the phases that you went through to get to the level that you're at right now? And Chris, keep going with that, please.
Okay. Well, it's funny that you should ask that. Nick Gilliland of what's his
Nightlife Kennels.
Nightlife Kennels. He identified. He recently did a video, and he identified the 4 stages of houndsman, and I think he did a good job on that.
Yeah, that's where I got that question from. Yeah.
Part of my job duties as a conservation officer for several years was to teach hunters education, and the International Hunters Education Association breaks this down into actually 5 stages, and it's not any different for houndsmen. But you've got, I'll just lay this out as a typical kid, you know, my own experience. So when I first started hunting, you know, I enjoyed going out and just shooting a gun. You know, I really like to shoot. And most beginning hunters want to feel the recoil of the firearm in their shoulder. And so you get into this stage where you want to shoot. And then as you get a little more experience, then you move into what's called the limiting out stage, where your identity as a hunter is closely related to being able to kill a limit of squirrels. You know, if you didn't kill your daily bag limit of 5 squirrels walking out of the woods, in that stage you identify that as a failure because you did not kill 5 squirrels. And then you move as you get more experience and you understand, then you get into the method stage. The trophy stage. You get into the trophy stage where you feel like that, you know, I've got to kill a big deer. I've got to kill a big elk. I've got to kill, you know, trophy type animals. And you identify your hunt that way, as if you didn't do that your hunt was a failure. And then you get into what's called the method stage. And the method stage is you know, how you hunt the animal. And you feel like that if people aren't deer hunting with a flintlock rifle or traditional equipment or a bow or whatever they're doing, then their method is wrong, and you judge people on that. And you feel like that if you're not going by these self-imposed rules that you put on yourself and other people, that your hunt is a failure. And then finally you get into what's called the sportsman stage or the mentoring stage. And that mentoring stage or the sportsman stage is where you've come full circle and you understand that it's better to see people out there hunting and getting other people involved in hunting than how they're hunting, what method they're using, whether killing big deer or small deer. Those are the types of things that sportsmen do. And we relate that back to houndsmen, like the shooter stage. You can relate that directly to some of the videos you see on Facebook where guys think the biggest thing that they can put on Facebook or social media is a picture or a video of a pup barking at a cage coon. I was there. That's why I brought home that first red tick, is because my uncle brought that out. There's a cage coon there, and man, that dude could sing on that cage coon, and I thought I was walking in high cotton. So we go through the same stages regardless of what we're pursuing, but for houndsmen, you can tie that into every part. For the limiting out stage, I always, when I was 15, 17 years old, my uncle would come in and he'd have 6 coons on the tailgate, and I'd treat one, and I felt like I failed as a hunter. So you can relate it right back to our houndsmen too.
Right.
I'd like to jump in there just a minute, Eddie.
Yes,
we
sir.
talk about these phases of hunting and how we progress along the way. And, I've been around hounds all my life. I spent countless days in the woods as a kid and all the way up through my married life. I even hunted when I was in Japan with the Air Force. But, it's a never-ending process. And I'll give you an example. I was at UKC, had been there quite a while, and we had a big game column in the Coonhound Bloodlines magazine. It was written by a fellow named Gary Washburn, and Gary lived out in New Mexico. And I knew the Washburn family, and maybe listeners out there will remember a book called General Red about a red bone bear dog. And if you haven't read it, it's worth your time. It was written by this Gary Washburn's brother, Ozzie Washburn. But anyway, I asked Gary to write a big game column for Coonhound Bloodlines magazine, and he did a great job with it. And he invited me out to New Mexico to go bear hunting with him on a authentic horseback bear hunt, dry ground, with his Walker hounds. And I took him up on that, and I went out and I had a great time out there. And in fact, that translated, I did take a plot female with me out there too. And so anyway, had a great hunt. What I'm getting to is I met a gentleman out there that Gary Washburn told me that this is the last of the old Ben Lilly type hunters that I know. His name was George Hobbs. George, I hope you're still out there and kicking. Last I heard, George was in Oklahoma. But George Hobbs was a consummate houndsman. He could read sign like I could read a newspaper. He showed me all that I know, and it's not very much, but I could tell George, he could look at a cat track and tell me all kinds of things about that cat, what sex it was, which direction it was traveling, all of these kind of things. And I say that to say, this houndsmanship is a never-ending process. And no matter how much we think we know, and, I've been at that point where, I have accumulated a lot of knowledge, and I'd love to share that with people. But there's people out there that know so much more than I do. So getting back to these stages and all, no matter what stage we're in, there's always that next stage that we can move to. And the great thing about the hound fraternity is that we have people out here that are willing to share their knowledge, not in a condescending way, not in a holier than thou way, not in the attitude that I'm the pro and you're the rookie, but they're willing to teach and to show if you're willing to learn. And I think that's the point to be made there.
One other thing I'd throw in there real quick is I think your true houndsman will never identify with that level. You know what I mean? They will never sit back and say, I'm a houndsman. The person that has truly reached, because that humility kicks in. How old were you, Steve, when you went out there and hunted with Gary Washburn?
Oh, well, let's see. I was easily in my 40s.
And you'd
probably upper 40s.
And you'd been hunting your whole life, but yet you recognized that there was something to learn there.
Sure, absolutely, and I'm still doing it through this podcast as I talk to people.
Yeah, me too.
And
that's a cool thing about doing the podcast, Eddie, is we get to bring all these subject matter experts in here for, wherever they're from or whatever they're hunting, and glean their minds or their experience and share that with everybody. And that's the most awesome part of doing the podcast for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've learned I learned so much just from listening to y'all, in the podcast and different things. And, it's very, very informational and helpful, in becoming just, getting out there and wanting to, coon hunt or rabbit hunt, whatever kind of hunting you're doing with your hound, but just getting in tune with your hound. You got to build that relationship with that dog and know what it's trying to tell you. And just like you said, you never stop learning. That's just like in my trade, you might have been doing it for a long time, but every day there's something that you're figuring out, a way to make things quicker, a way to do this, you're thinking ahead. So totally get it. And yeah, you guys are spot on. So question for you. What could I look for in becoming, a new hunter? Like what kind of things should I be aware of when I, get my hound and start getting out there, Steve?
Okay. I think the biggest mistake that most new houndsmen make is being over anxious to get a dog and being gullible, for lack of a better word. Unfortunately, there are people out there that, it's like a shark. They smell blood in the water when somebody's new, and they realize that they don't really perhaps know the rope, so to speak. And so, the young hunter or the new hunter doesn't have to be young. It can be anybody that's new to the sport, wants to jump right in with both feet. Man, I'm going to buy this dog. And they listen to the stories, and they don't go hunting with that dog, and they don't take the time to really decide if this is the right dog for them or for their situation. Without getting into a big deal on that, I always tell people the best thing that a young hunter can do is to go find an older dog that's maybe on the downturn of its life. It's a broke dog. It's not going to be running trash. It may not be it may have lost a step or two, but it's still solid. It's a good trailer, got a good nose, a good stay-put tree dog. Many times in this game of competition hunting that I've been involved in with so many years, a hound, once he finishes out into a Grand Night champion or whatever, the hunter gets disenchanted with him and says, well, I want to get another pup and start over. So these kind of dogs are out there. But the point I'm making is get an older dog. You can get one for a reasonable price. Let that dog teach you. And then when you've got your feet on the ground and you and that dog are working together, then consider going out and getting a well-bred puppy out of proven stock of dogs. In my case, I prefer a family-bred dog, and get that puppy, and then let that older dog start that pup for you and move in that direction. Don't fall for the hype. The dog's on sale. That if it sounds like it's too good to be true, it probably is. Oh, yeah. And so I think that's one of the main pitfalls that young hunters get into going into the sport, and then overconfidence too at the early stages. don't be afraid to say, I don't know much about this. It would be like me going out there to New Mexico and telling George Hobbs that, man, I know all about this lion hunting stuff. Step back and watch me, it doesn't work that way. And, but anyway, I think that's one of the pitfalls that young hunters fall for, and it can be avoided. Go hunting with the dog. There's an unwritten rule among houndsmen. If you don't know the dog, make sure you know the man that's got the dog. So if Chris Powell tells me this dog is thus and so, I know pretty much that that's the way that dog's going to be. But the guy on the internet with the big story, maybe not.
Right. Yeah, well, that took away my other question.
Let me follow up. Follow up real quick, Eddie, if you don't mind. Can I jump in there? I would add to that. One of the pitfalls that the beginning hunters make. Beginning hunters need to go find the guy that is successful. So surround yourself with successful people. We always get this idea that I'm going to get a dog and then I'm going to start hunting. And Randy Smith outlined this in the episode that we have with him. Go learn the sport. Purchasing that dog and the equipment that goes with it, the care of that dog, is a huge responsibility, and it's also a huge investment. So unless you know for sure that sport is for you, why are we buying dogs? Because we watch Where the Red Fern Grows, or one of the story of Bugle Ann, and we romanticize about it, or the Yearling, or something like that. Going way back in movies. That's how my romantic thinking started about hounds. But a young hunter or a new hunter would be doing themselves a great service by going and finding an experienced hunter, joining an organization. Out there where you're at, you've got the Oregon United Sporting Dog Alliance or Association. I'm not sure what the A stands for. If I was going to talk to a new hunter, I would tell them, go get involved with that. Pay your membership. It's a $35 or maybe a $40 investment that you're going to make up front. And out of that investment, you're going to be at these events. Maybe you don't even have a dog yet, but you're going to learn where you need to look for that dog. You need to spend some time in the field with an experienced houndsman, pursuing the game that you're looking to pursue, learning as much as you can, and then you'll know what type of dog that you actually need to do that, rather than doing an internet shop or a classified, off the classified boards or something like that. So the most important thing that you can do is familiarize yourself with the sport first, find out who the successful people are, and then pick their brains and learn everything you can from them, and you'll avoid a lot of the pitfalls that new houndsmen make. One of the things I see a lot is, and it's very well intentioned, so I'm not shooting anybody in the leg here. But I will see a litter of puppies that is advertised, and they say, I will give a puppy to a new hunter. In my mind, you are setting them up for failure. If it's not somebody that's local, if it's not the kid down the road that you're willing to mentor with that puppy, then a lot of times we're setting these new hunters up for failure, because they are going to make mistakes. And it's just like anything else. If you want to play football and you go out and want to take your first practice with the Seahawks or whoever, and you get knocked on your butt enough, you're going to realize that's not fun, and you're not going to want any part of it. But if you can start out at the right level and get a coach that can walk you through how to play football and how to do it correctly, then you're going to be successful and you're going to enjoy it. And the same thing applies to hound sports.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Okay, so moving forward, Steve, I have a question for you as far as, competition dogs and pleasure dogs. Now, you want the best dog that you can have, period. But, it seems as if the competition dogs are are better, or am I missing something here? Why do to me it seems like the competition dogs are more sought after as far as they win, they do this, but what's the difference between a competition dog and a pleasure dog? What makes them different?
Well, that division or those connotations are pretty popular in the coonhound world. And generally speaking, a guy said, well, this is a good pleasure dog. What that translates to mean, I've entered him in a lot of night hunts and I can't win with him. So therefore, he's a pleasure dog. We'll put him down in that category, But
okay.
But typically there are pleasure hunters and competition hunters. The competition hunter is the guy that is competitive by nature. He loves playing a game, and really, this coon hunting in competition is a game. I had a friend named Les Rogers that worked for the Purina company years ago, was a blue ticker, and he would always say that was his motto: "It's only a game." And people get real worked up all about it, but it is a game that we play with dogs. And there are rules, and those dogs have to be able to perform according to those rules. So you got a couple hours out there that you can, and hopefully you want the dog to be quick at everything he does. Hard hunter, quick strike dog, quick tree dog, stay put, all this. And then that morphs into all kinds of possibilities of different ways people think that you have to win, or the type of dog you have to win. Typically, a pleasure dog for most people is a dog that they enjoy going out there in the middle of the week. They turn the dog loose. He's broken off of trash. He's not, when he opens, he barks, he's on a coon track, or this could also be, I guess, applied to big game hunting as well. But this is a dog that, it's just the solid cooner. He's got one thing on his mind. He wants to go tree a raccoon. He's usually good to listen to. He doesn't hunt out of the country. He's easily handled. When you want to go home, you can put your hands on him and take him home. So that, is, in generally speaking, is a pleasure dog. I think a lot of people get this idea of the 8 minute or 8 seconds of fame, that they have to have in competition. So generally speaking, a competition dog is a dog that performs according to the rules of the given organization, whether it's UKC or PKC or whatever. And the pleasure dog is generally the dog that a guy just enjoys going and treeing raccoons with. The dog's a pleasure, and I think that's where the word comes from, to hunt with. And so, generally speaking, that would be the difference.
Okay. Yeah. What I got from that is, like you said, I put him in a couple night hunts. He didn't win.
Yeah.
Because, you want, when you go pleasure hunting, you want all the same things that, you're going to do in a competition. You want him to strike off fast. You want him to make sure he's on the track. You want him to treat a coon. I mean, that is the end game. That is the goal of while we're out there. We want the meat in the tree. So basically, when you enter him in that competition, he doesn't win, and all of a sudden he's a pleasure dog. But I understand what you're telling me.
Well, I think if I can jump just a little bit here, and I don't want to monopolize this, but the times change. There was a time that we could say the pleasure dog will win in competition. And that will, if you've got a good solid coonhound, you can win no matter what, and we hear about the hunts for money where that money's awarded at the end of the hunt, whether the points were plus or circle or minus. There's always a winner to every cast, and that school of thought. But the idea is that today, I think more than any other time in our history of this sport, the dogs that are really sought after as competition dogs aren't pleasure dogs at all. They're dogs that hunt far and wide. We have this saying that they get, deep and lonely. with two looking down. In other words, get struck, get through the country as far as you can, get treed, use up most of the clock to go score the dog. So that's not the guy that's got to get up at 5 o'clock and go to work in the morning is not going to want to hunt that dog on Wednesday night, So there's been a big change, I think, from the time when the pleasure dog and the competition dog were one and the same. Now that seems that gap has widened considerably.
All right. Okay. Well, so moving on, why do you think there is a decline in the number of hunters and houndsmen as there were from before, Chris?
Well, I think part of it is just the demographics and age. I've studied this and researched it quite a bit. When guys came back from World War II, I'll back up before then. At the turn of this the early 20th century, still 75% of our population was agricultural based. And Mike Thorman touched on this. He said the farther people get away from the farm, the less in touch they are with reality. When you grew up on the farm, you knew where your food came from. And there wasn't a TV, there wasn't a lot of entertainment, so people hunted. It served two purposes. One, it was fun. It was a recreational thing. But also it supplied food for the table. So as we progress through the 20th century, we have this break in the 20th century called World War II, where these boys left the farm. They went and served with the armed forces, had a great victory. They developed deep camaraderie, fraternal relationships with the people they served with, and they came home. A lot of them never returned to the farm, and we went into the industrial age where our World War II veterans moved to town. They had a job. They were making money, but they still had that fraternal feeling of wanting to be with other like-minded people. And a lot of the people they hunted with were World War II veterans. So you saw the uprise of things like the Isaac Walton League, and in the wildlife profession, we call that the golden age of conservation, because you saw all of these local conservation groups popping up, and these guys would go to their lodge meetings or their club meetings and be involved in with other hunters and develop these ideas on wildlife propagation. We had people that would work with the DNR and encourage them to, hey, we don't have any rabbits, we love to rabbit hunt, so let's figure out a way to bring rabbits here from Kansas, or rough grouse from Missouri, and we saw that golden age of conservation. And as we go on, we just failed to mentor other young hunters to come into the sport. And this is no disparagement against our World War II veterans at all. I think I've even felt this myself as a Desert Storm veteran, where, when I got back from that conflict, I enjoyed spending my time with other veterans because I could identify with them, and had this feeling that other people didn't understand. So at some point it became an exclusive deal, and we failed to mentor people. So here we are in 2019, and we're sitting back and we're scratching our heads and saying, why don't we have more hunters? Well, it's because we failed as a sporting group, a group of sportsmen, to properly mentor and continue. We're definitely in 2019. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the most amazing story for wildlife that the world has ever seen. But we've failed to deliver the message over the years, and we've developed this identity crisis where we've allowed the anti-hunting to hijack several key terms like conservation. These extreme groups are identified in the media as conservation groups, and they are not. Just like the term trophy hunting, if it was not for people, the men and the women who were going out there and trying to harvest mature animals, take them out of the population so that the population could continue to grow and flourish, then we would have no wildlife on the landscape at all. And as my good friend Clay Newcomb often says about trophy hunting, I am preaching it, my brother. I am not ashamed, of being a hunter, and so he does a good job there. But that's the reason we've got this decline. In the number of hunters, and some of it's just natural. Our hunters are gray. My hair's gone and my beard's gray.
Mm-hmm. So how can the huntsman community be more inclusive in getting these younger hunters started, and what would be sort of a solution to grow it?
I'm going to defer to Steve.
Well,
okay,
Eddie, as Chris was talking there, I remember when I was at the UKC, I read a headline in the Wall Street Journal and an article about the decline in clubs across America. And of course, they weren't talking about hound clubs. They were talking about the animal clubs, we call them, the moose, the elks, the lions, the eagles, the bowling leagues, all of those kind of things back in the 80s and 90s began to see a decline in membership as people were less likely to be affiliated with a club. And the club has always been at the heart of the hound sport for most people, maybe not so much out west where the more rugged individualist is the norm. But out east, we typically, you go to a coonhound event on a Saturday, it was an all-day event. They had all kinds of things to do. The kids were running around playing. There were chicken on the grill. There was a water race going on and a field trial, and at night there was a night hunt. And so anyway, that has declined, and I think that has been part of the problem. And of course, as we go to social media and the devices that we have now, we're all becoming more inclusive. We don't seek out other people of like, birds of the feather, right, so to speak. So I think that's been one of the main things. And then the other things are, of course, the loss of hunting territory and the fact that kids are being raised in the cities now instead of the country. But when we look at all that, I see a silver lining. I see young people. I see people like you, Eddie, that are interested in getting into the sport and in large numbers. And I used to think I knew basically everybody in the what we'll call the organized hound game. And now, I look at names in magazines, and I look on social media, and I know very few people compared to what I did before. So there is an interest out there, and it really behooves us to recognize that there are people like Eddie out there that want to learn about this sport, want to be involved in it, and need to know how to do it. And I applaud the registries like the UKC and the PKC that are doing youth programs to try to get these kids involved. And I have an idea about that. I think a mentoring program is going to be much more effective than just having a big day where we give the kids all kinds of prizes and then they forget about it until the next year. But that's another subject for another day. But I do see a silver lining in this cloud, and I think it is the fact that people are there's a lot of young people out there and new people that want to get involved in the sport.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're onto something with the mentoring program because it's a lot easier when you have someone who has the knowledge to go to them, go hunt with them, pick their brain, just call them when you need them. You know, it's a good tool to have, and we need more mentors out there so that, you know, you don't have to start off ruining the dog and, you know, going through all kind of things that we really didn't need to go through if we had somebody there to kind of coach us and show us the ropes and guide us through, you know, the things that we trying to accomplish. So definitely mentoring is a big deal, especially for me. So I wish I had somebody, you know, I could call up and go hang out with and, you know, go load the dogs up and get in the woods and learn stuff, because, you know, that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. But
I wish you lived down here, Eddie. We'd have
you wouldn't be able to. You wouldn't be able to get me. You wouldn't be able to get me out of your house. I'm moving in, baby.
Well, you would be welcome, as my mother would say, as the flowers in May, because I enjoy being able. I think anything that we know, that we've learned, and we want to share it. You know, that's just human nature. Yeah. And there are a lot of guys like me. We're still able to get out there and follow a hound, and we want to impart what we've learned to guys like you. So yeah, that would be great. In fact, we're going to need to set that up for some time where we can get together, for sure.
Yes,
absolutely.
Sir, for sure. Yes, indeed, we have to. You know, I've always been one of the guys where, you know, I sit back and listen and I watch. I don't talk very much, but you know, if I know somebody or I see somebody who I feel like I can learn from, I want to get under their wing and just pick their brain and just learn everything that I can from them. I've never been one of those type of people who I think I know everything, you know, because it's just, when you think you know everything, you don't know anything, you know. So, but yeah, definitely we'll have to set up something to come learn something from y'all and do something fun. So let's see, what else do I got for you guys today? So, this is a question. So, when you're coon hunting, what type of dog is going to be the best dog to coon hunt, and why? And I only say that because there's you know, several different coon hounds, and personally, I like plots. I know that Chris likes.
Hey, you're a good man. I knew there was something I liked about you, Eddie.
I got to butter him up, Chris. No, but honestly, I do like plots. But you know, when you like in competition hunting, you see a lot of treeing walkers. Why do you see so many walkers as opposed to the blue ticks, the red bones, or the plots? What makes that so different? And then when you go bear hunting, you see a lot of plots as opposed to, well, you know, I see a lot of walkers too, but still you see more plots. Plots are known for bear hunting. So what are is it DNA? Is it just, you know, over years they've been, you know, trained to go after that specific game? Or what is it? What would you say? And I'm going to go with Steve on this one.
Okay, Eddie. This subject came up, and in the podcast that our listeners have heard with Mark Dufresne from up in Maine, the registered guide, and we talked about this and the differences in the breeds. And it boils down fundamentally to choice. To the type of the breed of dog that a person was drawn to, and how much time he put into that breed. Because all of these coonhound breeds, and there's now 7 with the introduction of the American Leopard Hound, they're what we call 7 recognized purebreds, but they're fundamentally separated by color. They're all hounds. They're all scent hounds. They all have the treeing instinct. So then it becomes a matter of how those dogs were bred by those hunters that possess those dogs. The Walker dog became very popular because of the night hunt. And with the foxhound background, it was quick, it was fast on its feet, it could get to the tree first, and so it was a natural for the rules. Other people like my father, who cared nothing about competition hunting whatsoever, but was a houndsman down to his toenails. He loved the plot dog because of their determination, that no quit attitude, the toughness. He was a farm boy. He was a World War II combat vet. He was a pipe fitter. He walked on the high steel, as I've said before, with a block and tackle on his back and things like that. And so he was tough, and he wanted a tough dog, and the plot fit that description for him, that. And so I think it boils down to a lot of personal preference. The plot, down through its whole ancestry, has been bred for hunting big game. The treeing walker, on the other hand, and a lot of people are hunting walkers with great success on bear. But I think it boils down more to personal preference than anything else. But then it also, if you drill down, it's how those dogs within that breed have been bred selectively for certain traits that make them excel at the particular game. Calvin Redhouse would want a dog that can trail a line on dry ground, in the middle of the day in Arizona, and my experience with what I knew to be a good cold trailing plot dog in West Virginia, I took him to West Texas. He was a lost ball in high weeds when it came to trailing in those kind of conditions. So it all boils down to individual preference, but I think it's also how the dogs then are, use the word, customized to fit that particular type of hunting.
Okay. You want to chime on that one, Chris?
Well, I would just say real quickly that the easy answer is because there's 10 times as many walkers as there are any other breed competing. That's the of course.
Sure seems like it.
So I say that.
But the walker man would chime in and say, why
exactly.
Are there
that's what I was getting ready to say. I say that tongue in cheek, from a humorous standpoint. The thoroughbred horse is a great horse on the racetrack or in a jumping arena, but I've said this before. A lot of times, thoroughbred that I would get off of the racetrack is not necessarily the horse I'm going to want to ride through these southeastern Indiana hills. So I think we put a lot of rules on ourselves and limitations on ourselves when we're looking at the types of dogs that we want to hunt. You can't argue with the success of the walker breed. There are several accomplished walker breeders out there, and when it comes to competition hunting, then as Steve said, these walker breeders have capitalized on how to breed the dog that can be successful in that arena. And I think some of it is simply, we go back to that hunter stages, the method stage. We get stuck in this method. If you're not hunting with a walker, you're wrong. If you're not hunting, if it's blue, it's tree. Put a little brindle in your kennel. But my question to you, Eddie, is you say you like plots, but based on what experience? How do you know you like plots?
And that's a good question. Honestly, I've had a little experience with hounds, and they were plots, and that's the only reason why because that's what I know. I don't know. I haven't been around I haven't been around a walker or, a blue tick. I've been around a few plots, and I like, I just like them. I got to do a little bit of hunting with them, and it was fun. It just, it's like in the rodeo, those guys that you ride your first bull, it's just getting your blood, and that's just how it happened for me. Not to say that, if I hunted with another dog, that wouldn't, tickle my fancy, so it's just, what I've experienced, and that's why. That's all I know. I don't know anything, so I honestly couldn't give you a good reason or rhyme or reason why it would be better to hunt a plot. I just know that right now I do like those. So, any other questions for me?
Nope. All right, yet. Not yet.
Nope. Not yet.
Carry on. Hey, tell us just a minute. The listeners here have been introduced to you briefly, Eddie, but tell us just a little bit about who Eddie McMillan is.
There you go. That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a very good question. Eddie McMillan is from Texas. He loves to fish, loves to go camping, loves to be outside in the woods. Live here in Oregon now. Well, let me digress. I lived in Texas, moved to Florida for a while, and I met someone and moved up to Washington. And then from there, I started working, just became a journeyman plumber, and my wife, her uncle is a duck hunting fanatic. So when I get the chance and I have time to go, we go duck hunting, which is fun. Love it. And two boys that keep me on my feet. And just a family man who likes to be outside, loves to go fishing, and just loves nature. It's really crazy because growing up in Texas, you don't see mountains with snow on them year round. You see little hills and little prairies and stuff like that. Man, I got here and I can right now from my house, once I walk off my street, I can see Mount Hood, and it's just beautiful. It just, every time I see it, it gets me. It's like it never gets old. It never gets old. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it. So that's a little bit about me. Just love the outdoors, love to fish, and it's really good salmon fishing.
How did you get interested in the hounds, Eddie?
Well, I love dogs. Always had one, and my buddy back in Texas had some beagles, and we would go rabbit hunting, and that's how I got started. Like, I was like, you know what? If I ever get the opportunity, the chance, I want to get some beagles and do this rabbit hunting thing, and from there just explored on, and saw coon hunting, and using dogs for just everything, with deer, and then that's how I just became interested and intrigued with it. So yeah, basically rabbit hunting.
Nice.
I've got a question for Eddie. I'm an older guy, okay? Everybody knows I've passed the 70. Have a lot of ideas, a lot of stories to tell, all that kind of thing. But every once in a while, I get a little check down in my gut that, maybe these younger people don't want to hear these stories about the old guys. Maybe I'm yesterday's news. Maybe, I need to up my game, modernize, streamline my thinking. What's a young guy like you at 33 years of age? And you can be open about it, and there's nobody's judging anybody on this show. But what do you think is the general consensus of the younger people out there about older people that tend to want to be, share all this information and so forth? Is that generally accepted, or do we, in fact, as older hunters and houndsmen, need to kind of change our rhetoric a little bit to reach the younger person? That's a sincere question.
That's a very good question, and we could probably have a whole show on that one. For me personally, I'm not like everybody else, honestly. So I call them my old schools. I love my old schools to give me my knowledge and my wisdom, and I kind of model myself after that, and that's what I like. Now, I feel like the younger generation, they're kind of lost. Like, I don't understand a lot of things that they do, but to, I guess, reach them, yeah, you would have to kind of talk their lingo, I guess you would say, for lack of better words, to get to them and reach them. But I feel like once you do, they want that knowledge. I mean, who doesn't? If you have somebody who's trying to tell you something and try to give you, knowledge to where you don't have to make that same mistake that they did, why wouldn't you want that? And that's what I hope to get out of a mentor, out of a, an older person who's been there and done that. It's like growing up, I was so hard headed. I didn't want to listen to anything my mama had to say, but everything, I'm telling you, 100% of what she told me was 100% correct. And I right hand to the man, I'm telling you, she was 100% correct. And it took me up into my 30s to honestly realize that, she might have been hard on me, or, I might not have liked what she said, but she was coming from a genuine good place, and everything that she ever told me was 100% correct. So once we, as young people, open up our minds and really just try to see where the other person's coming from and try to respect that knowledge, to respect them, to know that, hey, you know what? They are older. They have been around longer, and they have been through things. It's like, you think that you're going through something new, but you're not. We've already been through that. So let me help you with that. So, it's a tight line to walk with them, to try to, get your point across and help them understand that, hey, I'm not here to try to get down on you. I want to teach you something. I want to help you out. So, and then just kids in general, nowadays are just, I don't know what to say, eating Tide Pods and all kinds of stuff. I mean, we really need to grab a hold. We really need to grab a hold of these kids, seriously, because it's just spinning out of control. These games,
I saw something.
Throw the games away.
I got to jump in.
Let's get outside. Let's get in the woods.
That's right. I saw something today on social media. It says, how about going back to eating your Tide Pods and leave our ice cream alone? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This latest craze, I guess, is going and licking the ice cream in the store and putting the lid back on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Eddie, I got a question to jump in here real quick, if you don't mind, Steve.
No, go.
Okay, Eddie, do you think it's because maybe the reluctance from some of our younger hunters or younger people that are trying to get into hunting is because as older, more experienced hunters, we've made ourselves less accessible to the younger generation? And what I mean by that is, whether you're training a young dog or you're training a young hunter, sometimes you can get extremely frustrated. And so has the older generation failed to be open and accessible to these younger hunters? What's your opinion?
And yeah, I can honestly sit there and say that you might be onto something with that. Older generations, they are stuck in their ways, like they have a certain look,
Yeah.
they have a certain way. They have, they like the things in a certain order, and you got this young whippersnapper coming over here wanting to do this and that, and you're like, hey, slow your roll. You need to chill out. And you kind of put the reins on them a little bit, and they like, I don't really know. I don't like that. So, it definitely, as, mentors, you gotta loosen up. You gotta be open and have patience. It's like, with kids, exactly what it is. You have to have patience with kids. It takes a lot of patience. Even with young dogs, you have to have patience. And that's what it is. You just gotta take a breath and say, you know what? I'm not going to tell you what I think, but I'm just going to keep on going with you. We're going to get through this together. Don't give up on them. And that's, basically don't give up on them and have patience.
I would follow up. A lot of times I think as people, we think, well, I already made the comment that I've got gray in my beard. The only thing I had to do to get that gray in my beard was continue to wake up every day. That's all I had to do. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we get confused with thinking because we've got age that somehow we've gained wisdom with that. And certainly day-to-day living, you talk to somebody that's well up in their 80s, 90s, they've got a lot of wisdom to impart. But just for your average houndsman to think, well, I've been hunting for 30 years, and so I know everything, is the wrong attitude for the veteran houndsman to have. I've met, you take Ben Jones down there in Greenville, Tennessee. He hunts every day. He hunts all across the United States. There's a lot that Chris Powell can learn from a guy like Ben Jones. So we can't just simply write this off as I'm older, I know more. So the older generation also has to realize that there's a lot to learn from younger houndsmen as well.
But like we said before, though, in those phases, it doesn't end. You always are learning. You're always, you're figuring things out. So as being a veteran houndsman, with knowing everything that you've been through and where you're going, you already know that there's a lot more things that you have to learn. Yes, you know a lot, but there's more that can be done. And you can't sit here and think, oh, well, I've been hunting for, 40 years. I know everything.
You may have been doing,
you know a lot.
You may have been doing it wrong for 40 years. There's plenty of people out there like that.
Doing it wrong for 40 years. You just got to stay humble, stay humble and help when you can, pretty much, you can't think you know everything because you don't. And, for the younger generation, it goes the same way for them. You think you know everything, but you don't. Just sit back and be quiet and watch, and just learn something. So it goes both ways. It really does.
I was very fortunate to have a dad that was a houndsman. He knew a lot, but he never was overbearing with his knowledge in any other area except gun safety. And when it came to gun safety, he was preaching constantly. Check that safety, watch that barrel, unload that gun. But, I think about things that my dad taught me, and I'll give you one little example here, and it doesn't really have anything to do with hounds, but I recently, a couple years ago, we had this Hurricane Irma that came up through Florida here, and the county would bring in dump trucks full of sand and provide the bags, and people could go and fill sandbags to put around their homes in anticipation of the hurricane. Well, I went to do that, of course, and I have an area here in the back of my house. I thought maybe that I might get some water damage. And so anyway, I'm filling sandbags, and there's a huge pile there, and I see people taking the shovel and digging off the top of the pile and putting this and putting sand into these bags, and they're struggling, and it's going to. My dad taught me when I was very young. Hey, son, let me show you here. Take right at the bottom of the pile. Slide your shovel in right there. Dig from the bottom. Dig close from me. And man, I'm filling sandbags like a machine here. This 70-year-old guy, and these young guys, these young bucks, they're struggling. And it's just little things like that. That we can impart to people without lording it over them. On them,
right.
Hey, guy, I see a guy out there with 2 leashes on a couple of young dogs, and they're wrapping them around his legs and all this stuff. And I say, hey, son, they make a double couple here. Let me show you how to take an old O-ring and a couple of S-hooks and make yourself a double couple and clip that onto your leash. And then you've got those 2 dogs right side by side, and you can handle them just like it was one. Little things like that we can impart to these hunters without being, hey, dummy, those dogs are going to trip you. Don't you know any better than that? No, It's all in the attitude, I think.
But the delivery, the way you deliver the message, it also helps to be for people in general to be more receptive to it. You can't just scream at somebody and expect them to, want to listen to what you have to say. So,
I can throw in something real quick there, Eddie. I'm going to be much more motivated to help somebody who wants to learn. If a young houndsman comes into the mix and they're trying to tell me everything they know, they're trying to tell me all of their experience, they're trying to get this validation through bragging, I'm going to let that guy get those hounds tangled around his legs and let him struggle, and I'm not going to mention a thing. Now, I may see another young guy over here having the same thing, and he's struggling. You can tell he's frustrated. I know that he's coming at it with the right heart. So that's what I would say to younger houndsmen is, man, I mean, you walk into those situations and you've got the opportunity to pick the minds of some of the greatest houndsmen in the world, at times. And you've got to approach that, and we've said it before, with humility and not be trying to you're not going to impress Steve Fielder with your dog that's going to, you think you could win some night hunts with. He's he's handed more world championship trophies to people than any person the history of this sport. And so you bragging about your pot liquor that might it's not going to impress us. But if you come at it from the standpoint of, hey, I want to learn, tell me the stories, come at it from that attitude, and I guarantee you these the more experienced houndsmen, I hate to say older because that's not always holding true, but these more experienced houndsmen are going to be willing to share their knowledge with someone who wants to learn rather than wanting to impress.
Exactly.
Well said.
Very well said. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, guys, I think that's all the questions I got for y'all today.
Well, good deal, Eddie. I tell you what, I've enjoyed this and kind of put a new twist on our podcast here, and it was fun. I'm really excited about you being involved in the hound sports and wanting to learn more. I would really encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to get involved with the Oregon United Sporting Dog Alliance or association out there and get to know these houndsmen, and I guarantee you that they will be willing to welcome you with open arms, and that's so important. Just get to know the sport, get to know these houndsmen, and that's how you get started.
Definitely, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you guys and ask you a few questions, and it's been great. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Well, Eddie, it's been a great experience for me. I feel like I've made a new friend, and that invitation to come to Florida, I would suggest that you wait until the winter time, unless you like creepy crawly things of all descriptions. anyway, I wish you the very best as you go forward and with your children and with your job. My dad was a plumber and pipe fitter, and served him well for 30 some years. And so just the fringe benefit of this podcast to me is meeting people like you. And I really appreciate your time with us today and keeping old Chris and me on our toes and challenging us with your questions. And I just hope that there's some young hunter out there that wants to be like Eddie, wants to learn, and will come forward with their questions and so forth. And really, I think we've imparted a lot of good information to new hunters and young hunters today. And I just hope that it'll find root and will grow, and these people will have a lifelong sport that they can enjoy like I have.
Yeah, well, like you said, you gotta, it's kind of, you don't want to sound like like an idiot, like, well, I don't know if I should ask this question, because how they might, respond as far as, thinking it was a stupid question or not. But regardless of what the question is or how you may feel about it, just ask the question, regardless of what you feel like they're going to say, just ask the question. That's all it takes. Is that one question can spark so much more than you could even think. It was just like, it took a lot for me to even approach Chris with the, well, hey, I want to become a houndsman. Where do I need to start? What do I need to do? And I am so grateful of how accepting and friendly he was to me. And it kind of took me back for a second. I'm like, wow, he actually is talking to me. So, from that one spark, from the podcast where you guys were like, hey, you guys the young guys need to get out there. There's, people want to share that wisdom. And I was just like, you know what? I'm doing it. And I did. And look where I'm at now.
You're hosting the Houndsman XP podcast.
That's right.
Like, this is crazy. I still haven't processed that, but it's been amazing. And I'm just, I hope that there are more people out there like you guys who are willing to share your knowledge and just be helpful in any way that you can, because you just anything that I've asked, you guys have just given me solid answers and very good information. So
it's our pleasure, Eddie.
I'll leave it at that.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Eddie. We've been the benefactors for sure.
Well, Steve, I'm going to wrap.
Yeah, I definitely got it.
You done? You done, Eddie? You done with all your concluders? Can I step back into the host mode here?
Yes, sir. One more, but Steve, definitely, we're gonna. I'm coming down to Florida, and we're gonna do some hunting. I promise you that.
All right, man. Yep. It's a date. Right. It's a date. We'll just figure out the details. Okay.
That's good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
Well, Steve, you always close us out with those famous words. Why don't you get her done?
Yeah, it's that time of year, or time of day. I guess again, Chris, man, this has been fun. I've enjoyed this podcast tremendously. I can't believe it's over. Well, I'm going to tell you and Eddie, just like I tell our listeners every week, in the words of John Harris in West Virginia, when they turned the hounds loose on a bear. Chris and Eddie, you follow your hounds, and I'll follow mine.